All right, so let's do this. This is a live tutorial on getting started with Blender. And what is Blender? It is a awesome free 3D modeling software that you can use. You can make 3D renders with it. You can make videos. Also has a video editor built in, which is pretty sweet. Um, there's a lot of competitive software out there with it. Think Autodesk Maya and other softwares that cost a lot of money, but for me, free is better. And SolidWorks is a 3D kind of software that I use being in engineering, and coming to Blender. Blender is more 3D modeling software for artists, I would say, and for art. It can be used in technical work, and I have used it in technical work. But things like SolidWorks, Autodesk, Fusion 360, etc., they still have their place in building technical models. But today, again, I just want to show what Blender is about and how to install Blender. And the first thing you want to do to get started, go to www.blender.org, and you'll see the newest edition is version 3.2.2. And you'll see a lot of news, development updates on here, and just some use cases. A great site to kind of work through on your first venture with Blender. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, is download Blender. I'm using Windows 10 right now. Should work the same with Windows 11 as well. I'm going to download Blender 3.2.2. There are other versions for Linux and Mac. And you can also find older versions if needed from this website. So I'm going to go here, download Blender. Oh, yeah, sure, I'm not going to read it. Yep. Yeah, obviously. Let's go. So Blender should just take a few minutes to install. I'm multitasking right now, guys. All right, sure. Let's do this. 3.2. Man, and Blender has had a bunch of awesome updates since Blender 3 came out, version 3, and it just continues to be amazing. All right, now that we've installed Blender, I'm going to open the program. All right, so when you open Blender, it's going to start off with this, opening splash screen. You're always going to see this when you open Blender, and you can change a few settings here. I prefer the default settings, so I'm going to keep those. And so the GUI for Blender is here, and it's awesome. So you're always going to see the cube. When you enter Blender, and just for some mouse clicks, if you hold your middle mouse button, if you hold your middle mouse button, you can move the mouse and pan around the object or in your 3D space. I can also see a camera here. I can click on that camera and select it. I also see a light source over here. I can click on that light source and select it. I'm going to select my cube. So I can select it literally on the screen. I can see that I'm in the layout tab, so I'm in the layout mode or tab, and I'm holding that middle mouse button, and I'm panning around the cube. And so I can click on these here from the collection screen here. You'll see that this is the outliner, and you can change what is up in this top right screen. But for now, this is just a beginning Blender tutorial, how to install it, where to get it, and here is your cube. You have a bunch of settings for your 3D scene here in the right bottom part of the screen, and you'll see here that you have object properties right now. So if I click on the cube, it's going to give me my object properties. I can scale the cube in my X, Y, or Z directions. So you'll see this red line, that's the X axis, the yellow is the Y, and then of course blue, which you cannot see, is the green axis. However, I'm going to use some keyboard shortcuts, and I'm going to hit G to grab this object, and I can move my mouse around and just move this cube. I'm going to press escape though because I want to do none of that. I'm going to hit G, tap the Z key, and now I see my Z axis. I'm going to move my mouse up and down, and I can move that cube up and down in the Z axis. I can also hit the R key to rotate an object, and then I can also choose my axis. So if I hit the R key, then hit Z, I can rotate it around a Z axis. I can hit X, rotate it around an X, or Y, rotate it around the Y axis. But I'm going to hit escape because I want to do none of those things. With the camera, if I hit the 0 key on the number pad, I can see where my camera is directed, and right now it's directed at that cube. So if I did take a render, make a render of this scene, I would see exactly this. And I can make a render by hitting the F12 key. And so right now it is using the Eevee engine. There are 2 awesome engines that come with Blender, and I assume more that you can download and plug in because Blender is awesome. You can download third-party apps. A lot of things run in Python in the background, and there's just so many awesome third-party apps you can install with Blender. So there's a render of my cube in Eevee. Looks very fancy, very cubular, and I'm going to just leave that and just show a few more features with Blender. So with this cube, I'm actually going to go to this Materials Property tab. I'm going to give it a cool color. Let's make it a purple cube. Awesome. So now my cube is purple. However, on my screen, due to the shading, I'm not seeing that purple color. So I'm going to go up in the top right here. You can see what shading method you're using. And here is the material preview shader. I'm going to hit that. I'm going to get that purple color that I picked. Picking purple is peculiar. Anyway, you can also go to a wireframe shading. So now I can see my very cool cube. I'm going to rotate that on the Z-axis in a wireframe mode. And then I have this mode. What is it even called? It's called the solid mode. Then you have material preview mode, and then you have your rendered mode. So right now I can view this as a render, right? So I can pan around, zoom in, zoom out on my render. However, the engine I'm using right now, if I click the little render properties icon here, it's a little like camera looking icon. I can see that the render engine I'm using is Eevee, and I have all these render options. I'm going to change that to Cycles. Cycles is a very, very popular rendering engine in Blender. Makes very realistic renders, and it's awesome with light sources. So right now I'm running my video card is a GeForce RTX 3080, and it's a very powerful video card that does really well with lighting effects. And if I click on my light source and I press G to grab it, I can move that light source closer to the cube. I can move it around the cube and really get different effects with that light source. And if I hit a light source in particular, I get a little special icon down here for light sources. I can change the output of the light source. I'm going to change it to like say 20 watts, and the lighting is going to be a lot different, right? I'm going to kind of move it closer to the cube. Let's make it 100 watts. Yeah, very nice. I'm going to come in a little bit. I'm going to press GZ, move it down the Z-axis. GX, move it the X-axis a little bit. And then my color, I'm going to make it maybe a green? Nah. A blue. Let's make it a blue. Absolutely blue. Click on my camera, move it down in the Z-axis a little bit, hit that numpad 0. I'm going to grab it again, move it up on the Z-axis a little bit, hit that numpad 0. Oh, I like that. I'm going to hit F12 to render in cycles, but first I'm going to look at the render settings for both my viewport, which is what I'm in now. This is my viewport rendering, and then my actual render. I'm actually going to do 100 samples. I'm going to have my denoise on, and the more samples you have, the longer the render is going to take. However, the better your render is going to look, the more samples you have. And then if you go to this little setting here, the output properties, you can actually change the resolution of your output render. 1920 by 1080 is default. I'm going to keep it as that. Hit F12. And right now it tells you what sample it's on. So, every time it takes a sample, it's doing some light calculations in the background in the Cycles engine. And it's going to make it look really good. And you can see how that light bounces off that cube. Very fancy. It's a purple cube with a blue light. And this is what it ends up looking like. So not too bad there. That's a really nice render of a cube. Might make it my desktop background. If I hit image and I hit save as, you can then save your image wherever you'd like. And back on the output properties, I can see that the image I'm outputting with a render is a PNG, and there's a lot of settings to be played with in that area. I will do a separate video on like best practices around output render settings. Even on resolution and samples, you're gonna want to change those settings when you're making your different renders. Another thing with the cube, if I just hit S, so R was rotate, right? R is rotate the cube. G is grab the cube. I'm gonna go into the material view. Help speed up things a bit. So if I hit S, I can scale my cube, and I can just move my mouse up, down, scale that cube, smaller, larger. But I can also hit S and then pick a direction, let's say the X direction, and I can scale my cube in the X direction. I can hit Y, actually do the Y, Z, make a very tall tower, which is pretty cool. Just with a mouse move, I am just scaling visually, right? There's no calculations there. But of course, if I go to object properties, I can scale as I want to numerically, which is always very fancy. So now I have changed this to a fancy rectangle. I'm going to render that, and it's going to look a little bit different. So these are just some basic things that you can do in Blender. I'm going to go over in another video some even more in-depth features of Blender, how to save your models and bring them in a material view. Also going to do more deep dives on shading as well. So I added that material, that purple color, to this object, but there are so many options that you can do with that material, and Blender uses a node style material property GUI, and this makes it very easy to edit the way you create materials, and the nodes also add a sort of logic step to how these materials are being made. And so with that, I'm going to pause for a minute and then show you some just basic stuff you may want to pull up on the Blender website. Okay, so I'm back at the Blender webpage. If I go to download and release notes and go to 3.0, there's actually some fun downloads to play with here, and I'm going to scroll down. There's a awesome asset browser kind of introduction here, and you can download this cube ISO room and actually like pull in stuff from the new Blender 3.0 asset browser, which shows you a really cool uh, uh, addition that they've added to Blender 3.0. And so this takes you to the Blender demo files workspace. I'm going to download this cube diorama, and I will put this link in the description below. So I'm downloading that. I'm going to open that up, pull that out. Okay, well, this really cool scene has popped up. Of course, I'm going to hit the middle mouse button, kind of pan around that scene. I'm going to zoom in, zoom out by scrolling the wheel in and out. And that's a really cool scene. I can see that there's two windows here. I have my little 3D viewport window here. I'm going to hover here, and I have my little asset browser here. In the asset browser, this can take 3D models either internal to the file or external, could be on your computer, on an external hard drive, etc. And it will sort them and make little renderings or images of those models, and you can just easily pull them into the space, and you can see where you're going to put them in your space before you set them there. So I'm going to set this against the wall, and I can see that, oh, that's not right. I'm going to rotate it around, let's say, the y-axis. I'm going to hit 90 degrees. I'm going to hit negative 90 now. Awesome. I'm going to hit grab, x-axis, pull it away. G for grab, hit Z, pull it down to the Z-axis, and set my object there. Looks good. I'm going to pull in, let's pull in a desk. Put it against the wall here. That looks fairly good. Yeah. Looks like it's oriented right. I'm going to grab it on the y-axis, G and Y. Pull it with my mouse. Looks like it's not against the wall anymore. I'm going to pull it in the x-axis a little bit, get it away from that desk. I'm going to hit S on this, scale it down a little bit, make this smaller, move it away with my G key for grab. Now in the top here, you'll see that the default tabs are gone, but they're always there. So under General, I'm just going to go pull open a Layout tab. I like Layout a lot. And here is my scene. There's a lot of lighting going on right now. There is a camera. I'm going to hit the numpad 0, and I can see that the camera is given that an ISO view. And I'm going to go to Material View right now. Looks really good. I'm going to go to my rendering settings, cycles, 32 samples with the denoiser on. That's awesome. I'm going to hit F12. Let's see what this room looks like. I'm going to scroll out with my scroll wheel, just zoom out of this render a little bit. And here is my ISO room rendered in Blender in the Cycles engine. It's looking really good. You can see that that lighting has awesome shadow effects going through that window. You can see that we've scaled down this little cabinet here. We have a table here. And then we can just use that asset browser and just keep bringing in models, right? Keep changing this room as we want to, this 3D scene, and then make a cool render with it. And that's what Blender is all about, making awesome 3D renders, 2D renders, 3D art, 2D art, videos. It does a little bit of everything. And so I can zoom in a little bit, pan around again. So with the material properties, say on this desk, I'm going to open a general, let's see, shading tab. I want to look at that material in more detail. It's going to open up a new tab in a shading window. and I'm going to see down here, I'm going to see the shading editor. It's set for the object right now, and I can see that there is a wood style material that's here. And I can see that there's some settings here. And I can play with those settings. I can change the contrast of different things, give it a clear coat, make it very shiny. That's pretty awesome. And this gives you just an idea of how those nodes work in the material shading editor. So the nodes give you all these properties you can change on your material. So if I go to the rendered viewport, I can see it starting to change. I can change that clear coat, and you can see that it adds a very minor clear coat detail when rendered, right? Pretty interesting. I can also change the color, make it more of a cherry red. I'm going to zoom out. Looks quite different now, doesn't it? So these are some of the things you could do. There's also, if you click where it says object here, you can go to the world view, and you can see that there is a background right now. And so this is, everything that's around this 3D scene. Think of it as your scene is in a big sphere. You're inside a sphere. So if I zoom out, here's that sphere, right? And right now, just in this viewport, I see, an HDRI. You can see it here, some details, and there's that sphere I was kind of talking about. And it's just like a tree scene. You can change your background to be a single color. You can download HDRIs, and I'll show those in a future video on good places to get free HDRIs. You can make your own HDRIs if you'd like, and you can bring those into your 3D scene. And when you change your HDRI, it really changes the lighting within your scene, especially in cycles. And so I'm going to go back out to layout, and there's a good example scene. And in this layout view, if I move my mouse over here, I'm going to see it turn into a little kind of a cross plus icon. If I left click here and then drag to the right, I'm going to get two windows. I'm continuing to hold and drag, and then I'm going to click in this new window, and I'm going to change my editor type, and I can change it to that asset browser. And it's going to show me what's in the asset browser within this current file that I downloaded from Blender. I also have my own personal user library, which if you go to Edit and you go to Preferences, you can actually tell Blender where your user library is. So within this asset browser, you can actually bring in different things that are within this file. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to change to just take off the material mode. And add a cool painting to the wall. Scale that up a little bit. Maybe add a teacup and a teapot. And all I'm doing is dragging and dropping. I also see materials. So let me go back to the material preview. With these materials, I can literally just drag and drop materials to different things. If I want a wooden tea kettle instead of porcelain, I can do that. And I can see I'm holding, so I can scroll in and out with my camera, with my scroll wheel. I can also hold Shift, click the middle mouse button, and just pan left and right. So I kind of zoom in. I click my middle mouse button and turn to move it in a 360 fashion. I hold Shift, click the middle mouse button, and move, and I can pan when I do that. I can see I can't really zoom in right now. So let's fix that. I think it's under Preferences. So under Edit, Preferences. Let's see. And under navigation, if in the Blender preferences, if I hit auto depth, I think that will, yeah, fix that for me. Then I can really zoom in on this, what used to be a porcelain pot, now wooden. Hit the rendered mode, and I can see that start to render in the viewport. I'm going to go back to the material preview setting, drag and drop a computer here. I'm going to hit G, actually I'm going to hit R, excuse me, and Z. I'm going to rotate that the Z axis. I'm going to hit G and Y and kind of push that back on the table. And that's looking pretty good now, you know. Got a few extra objects in there. Maybe it's just add a chair just for fun. I know I saw one. Very cool. Hit RZ 90. Enter. Hit RZ 90. Enter. I'm gonna hit G. Hit the Y key. Move it up in that table. Maybe hit G, Y, pull it back away from the table. That looks pretty good right there. Hit the numpad 0 key, get a good view of this. Hit F12 to render this scene. Hit the scroll wheel, zoom out, and we can see that scene being rendered in cycles in Blender, and then I can save that image once complete. So with that, that is the basics of Blender, how to install it, where to find some demo files just to get started, and just some simple settings and such to get you up and running in Blender. And there are a multitude of tutorials online. If you haven't made a Blender donut, that should be one of the first things you do. So just on YouTube, go YouTube search Blender donut tutorial and do that donut tutorial. Hopefully this video here acts as a precursor to your donut tutorial series, or just helps you utilize skills that you've been learning in Blender. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Any questions or comments, please shoot them down below, and like and subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Thank you.